Alrighty. So there's going to be a bell in about 3 minutes, but maybe I can get this shown pretty quickly. So I was working on the hair and I realized something that might be helpful. And a few other things is before I go into the hair, you notice that I've got a lot of value on the skin right now. Probably need to put a little bit more up in this region here. But you're starting to see some of these forms that are in the photograph in the face. Now, one thing I would like to point out is that I have spent quite a bit of time working on looking at my photograph, looking at my drawing, and figuring out, okay, what's different? What needs to be adjusted? At this stage in the game, it's a little bit late to make any big adjustments, but you can kind of look and see, okay, is this eye tilted the wrong way? I did have an issue, which I thought I was recording, but I wasn't, with this corner of the eye here not really being at the same spot as this. And even here, I can see this eyelid could come down just a little bit more and give it a closer shape to the white that's there in that eye. So another thing that I wanted to point out was how to do hair. So while I'm shading the hair, I'm working on putting in shading, working on my two values. One thing that I can advise is hair is really complicated. There's lots of little like groups of hair. And if you did those videos that I had you do for practice, you might be finding that it's really difficult you can lose track of where you are very easily. So one thing I suggest doing is flipping it upside down. You can even use your photograph as a way to keep from smudging your paper with your hand, the side of your hand. And then you can also use your photograph to kind of block off spaces. So you're not looking at too much at once, which can be kind of overwhelming. So, for example, right in this area here, now I'm not adding any texture right now. All I'm doing is adding value. So I'm looking here, I'm seeing this area is going to be a lot darker. So that is over by the neck right here. This is even darker. So I do want to kind of break that up a little bit so that I can see. There's that bell I was talking about. Isn't that bell incredibly long? I don't know why they're so long these days. So I'm going to go ahead and add in some value. And you'll notice the way I'm adding in value is I'm working in the direction that the hair would be going in. Right up to the edge. Thinking that this is probably going to need to be darker here. Eventually, I am going to add a little more texture into this, but for now, I am just trying to get value in place. Just trying to figure out where each of these little strands of hair is and make sure that I draw them in the correct value. And I'm following the direction that the hair is going in. So you can see this strand kind of swoops in. So I'm going to keep shading this, but make sure that this is more curved over here than this, which is going straight down. And take your blender and just make sure that as you're doing this, you kind of go in and blend. Because remember, we're not really thinking about texture right now. You can see oils from my skin created these little spots there. Got to be careful of that. You can fix it by erasing it and redoing it. You can also prevent it by putting a piece of paper underneath your hand. So I've got more hair that's kind of jetting out from the side a little bit over here. And by just following that direction, I'm already setting myself up to kind of have better organization overall. And this will be really helpful when I go to add in more details in the hair and texture. But for now, I'm just adding in value. So that's what you can see so far. Let me pull this up. Is just the basic layout of this part right here. And I did it upside down. It really doesn't make any difference which way you draw it, as long as your photograph is turned the same direction, right? Then I'm going to continue to do this on this side, but for now I'm going to go ahead and press pause on the video, and then I will bring it up again when we're ready for texture. Okay, so the next part here is going to be adding texture. So if I'm adding texture, I'm going to do something real fast as a backup. If I'm adding texture right now, then what I want to do is make sure that I first have layers of value, one layer of value pretty much everywhere, except for in areas where there might be, highlights and such. I'm going to go ahead and following the contour lines of the hair, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of smoothing. Remember, you shouldn't be pushing down too hard when you are smoothing with a paper towel or blender. And then one thing I like to do is I like to look at what I have here and start with an eraser and just pick up some of the areas where the hair is lightest and where there may be some crossover strands. They're not going to stay this value, but sometimes it's really helpful to do this because it kind of lines up your hair in spots where it was maybe difficult to see or control before. Like, for example, this really long strand here. This light one right here, the one that's right near the face. So I'm just going in and kind of correcting some of the areas where the hair was maybe crossing over. It went a different direction than most of the other strands. And this is really helpful because the eraser doesn't take away too much from your shading. And you can continue to layer value, especially if you're aiming for those lighter areas. You can put in more layers of value with this. And think about tapering your lines too. You're not putting a ton of pressure on your eraser. You're actually kind of lifting as you're drawing. So it's going to have a really nice taper to it. So now what I'm starting to see is a little more texture. And all I've done is put shading in there, and I've also lifted up some of the shading. And you can see that this texture is really starting to kind of mimic what the hair is doing around the head. This isn't the only way to do this, but this is the way I like to do this, because I feel like it sets me up really well to start adding in some darker values at this point. And I can focus them in and kind of avoid the areas that I erased up. I can even layer on top of what's already there, and it'll give me a nice starting point for getting dark values like you see up in this part of the head. So that's where I'm going to keep going. Add in more value everywhere around all of those spots that I erased up. And I might even add some more value on spots that I did erase. So like here, I want to put just a little bit more value in on top. Remember, you're still following the direction that the hair is curling in. So all of my shading is following those kind of contour lines there. And I'm not doing texture just yet. I'm still shading. I'm adding in the darkest tones right now to the hair. Well, pretty dark tones in the hair. Maybe not the darkest just yet. Needs quite a bit of layering still. Alrighty. So I'll keep going with that. So another thing that I'm noticing as I'm adding is clearly my background is darker than my hair here. So in some respects, you're going to see some of these very light strands of hair just because the background is dark. So I have to be kind of careful about that. One way I can fix that is by adding shadows to the background, which I certainly don't want to put this background in because it's got like a ceiling fan in it, and I don't want that in my drawing. But what I could do is I could start to add some shadows to the background too. And you can be a little more, you don't have to be as smooth with your shadows in the background. You can be a little more textured if you want. We are planning on putting some watercolor, or I was planning on putting in some watercolor in the background here. But I can put some cross hatching back here and kind of darken this space if I want to kind of give my hair a dark background to be offset against. Because right now, the background is very dark in the photograph, but very light in my drawing. So if I give it this kind of interesting pattern background with my pencil, what I can do is put in some value that'll help my hair stand out a little bit more. And you can see that pretty clearly right along this strand of hair. Now this lightness here that's in the photograph is actually visible because I put something in the background. I don't know. When it comes to backgrounds, obviously it's part of the composition. And I told you not to place your photo in the middle of the composition because the background can give you more visual interest than just, a straight up right in the center portrait. So by allowing myself more room, I have more room for creativity up here. And this mark making that I'm doing right here, I could expand that, maybe fade it out to a lighter texture as I go further out. So maybe space the lines out a little bit more. You don't have to do the same texture that I'm doing here. You could make it nice and smooth and blend it, but I really like the way that this texture looks. And I think it kind of fits with, you know, the expression on my face of kind of, it looks like annoyance here. So you can get these kind of crazy cross-hatching lines in here. I don't know if you've ever seen that picture of the woman who's trying to think and she's got like math around her head. I mean, you could do something kind of funny if you wanted to. It doesn't have to be serious. You know, what's your personality? Do you have a serious personality or do you have a goofy personality? Would it fit better if you had some sort of texture behind your head? Would it be more interesting with the texture in your head rather than, you know, just kind of cloudy, faded out, smooth value? So yeah, just kind of think about that. I'm putting this texture in so that I've got a little bit more value to work with in the hair here. And I really felt like I couldn't move forward without it. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in right behind the hair. I can continue it later if I need to, but right around the edge of the hair, it needs to exist. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so now that I have this background stuff going on, now I can see some relationships that I couldn't see before, such as how dark this needs to be. And you can see it's almost as dark in this area as almost a pupil. So I really need to darken this quite a bit. Might need to sharpen my pencil. We'll see. And it helped to put this in the background because now I can really see that value change happening. And I can be a lot more conscious of where everything should be darker, where it should be lighter. And it'll look more natural too because I have spaces behind my hair that are open. So it'll look more natural when I get those little wispies and stuff taken care of. And right now I'm just adding more value. Once again, I'm not doing texture, just adding value to the hair. It looks like texture because I'm trying to fill it in the direction that the hair is going. I do need to sharpen my pencil a wee bit. There we go. I'm trying to add the texture in the direction that the hair is folding over the head. Already, that space looks a lot better than it did before. And I'm going to have to do the same up here, adding quite a bit of texture. I'm going to flip this over so I don't smear it everywhere. You got to be careful, protect your drawing. All that hard work can get messed up very easily by the side of your hand. Trust me, I'm left-handed. I know what that's all like. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going, keep adding in texture where I see it. Value, not texture. Value where I see it. And being careful to kind of avoid putting any value on top of my lighter strands of hair, which is quite difficult with this hair. It's all over the place. All right. But already we're seeing a massive improvement in the way this looked before versus how it's looking now. Now it's starting to blend with the background like it does in the actual photograph. All right. So I'll keep going with that, and you keep working on yours. And just keep adding value. Hair is probably the hardest part, but you are in the home stretch. All right, at this point, I want to show you kind of where to go with putting details in, textures, if you will. And I'm going to start with the eyebrows. So with the eyebrows, we are remembering to follow the directions that the hair is going in. Now, you can't see a ton of detail in my photograph, but you can kind of see some darker values in there. And then, since this is a portrait of me, I can look at my own eyebrow hairs on my face right now. And I can go, oh, that's the direction that the eyebrow hairs go in. And I can put them in there. You can always look at other pictures of yourself too, since you're drawing yourself. So I'm just basically laying in hair that's going in the direction that I'm seeing in the photograph. And I'm doing a little tiny bit of smoothing so that it doesn't stand out too much because it is somewhat blurred in the photo. Now, if you have a lot of detail in your hair, you may even take a very small eraser and kind of pick up any lines that you see. They sell erasers that can be sharpened like a pencil, which you can use for this sort of thing. Now, I actually have a very interesting thing happening in mine where my eyelashes are actually lighter than the shadow there. I don't know if you can see it there, but you see the little bits of hair there? So I'm going to go ahead and take my eraser and flick out some of the value there. And then I'm going to put in some darker value. And what that will do is give the illusion that I'm seeing in the photograph right here of some little hairs showing up. I've got light eyelashes, and I am not wearing mascara in this picture, so you will be able to see kind of a little bit of light shining through my eyelashes in this picture. So that might be a tiny bit more exaggerated than it needs to be, but there you go. And then if you do have eyelashes in yours, remember what we did for the example, and just first you darken an area. And then if you see little lashes, that's when you're going to kind of go in and put in little lines here and there. I like to go in and put a little bit more detail into the eye. An important thing to remember is wherever your highlight is, you're going to have a lighter area towards on the opposite side of the highlight inside the iris. My eraser is gigantic, but if I put in I erase that just a little bit, put in a little more value on the side where the highlight is, it gives it this look of depth in the eye. You can do it again over on this side. The ring around your iris, it's very important that that is a little bit darker than the rest of the iris, but there you go. You've got this soulful look in the eyes. If you can see any detail on your lips, you can kind of add those bits in. Seeing a tiny bit on mine. And then hair is the big one. For hair, you're going to be going through, and if it's lighter, you can use an eraser and you can pick it up. You would want to use a smaller eraser. If it is darker, you're going to take your pencil and you're going to do some tapered lines in there to show that texture change. There is not a ton of dark texture in there. There's actually a lot of light texture in mine. So I spent a lot of time going in and putting some darker values in. And that's what I need to do is take an eraser and pick up anything that's not supposed to be dark. I can go in and in some of these other areas, put in some darker value. But in some of these areas up here, I'm going to need to use an eraser. You technically don't have to use an eraser, but it's definitely the easiest method for little wispies like that. So, gonna keep working on it. Keep adding texture here and there. Keep darkening, lightening. All those things will result in a finished final piece. So that's what it looks like so far. But like I said, I need to go through and add the texture in the hair still. And then the last step is going to be adding just a wee bit of watercolor to my background to give it a nice finished look and a little more texture too. All right. Hope you learned something. Thank you for watching.